Struzzi with us this morning. Our conversation brought to you by Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. How are you?
Good morning, Todd. I'm doing fine, thanks.
Good. It's good to have you with us here this morning as we talk about a couple of different things. Yesterday, of course, the one committee approving a piece of your legislation.
Yes.
A little pandemic relief for people in the entertainment industry, or the venue operators at least.
Well, yeah, it's very important. Unfortunately, these types of businesses and this particular industry really were left out of Senate Bill 109 that passed the hospitality grant program for hotels, restaurants, and things like that. So it was brought to my attention that these small venues that basically have music acts, small theaters, and things like that were left out of that grant program. And so I worked with some of the industry folks from the Pittsburgh region, really, and across the Commonwealth. I heard from a lot of people, feedback and things like that. So we crafted House Bill 878 that passed yesterday, and that will essentially create a grant program for these types of industries. I think it's so important, not just to help them get through the pandemic, but what we've seen at firsthand is some of these businesses, these smaller establishments that do have live music and things like that, have closed their doors and they're not coming back. And so for me, it's an immediate concern because we're losing jobs, we're losing businesses, we're losing these industries. But long term, if you think about it, young people, young musicians, they go to these places to hone their skills, to learn how to play in front of live audiences. And my fear is if we don't have that venue, if we don't have that opportunity for them, then people are going to lose interest in music. And I think that's just going to be tragic for our society. So that's part of the reason I wanted to do this. I'm really happy that the committee passed it unanimously yesterday, and now it will go on to the House floor.
It's really part of the overall health of a community to have the lively arts venues operating and offering things to families. So and it's part of their economic future too.
It absolutely is. I mean, it's not just music; it's theater, it's sports, it's all these small venues that were left out of that equation. And so it's so important for our community as we get back to some sense of a normal life that we have these entertainment opportunities, that we have these opportunities to go out and relax a little bit and enjoy some live music, enjoy some theater, and it really is a part of our quality of life. So I'm really happy that we're able to move that forward, and hopefully it gets across the finish line here very soon.
Yeah, that would be a good thing. And then that way, when funds are allocated from the federal government, we've already got the vehicle, as you put it, the vehicle in place to get
Absolutely, yeah. We'll be ready to roll once those federal funds become available.
All right, good stuff there. All right, somebody asked me this week to ask you this. They said that, there's Georgia with election reforms, Florida election reforms, Texas, Arizona, all of these different states that are putting election reforms, but Pennsylvania's doing nothing. That's not the case at all, is it?
That is entirely not the case. We have been working very hard through the state government committee, and I've been sharing this. If people subscribe to my weekly emails, we've been advertising the hearings. The state government committee conducted a series of, I believe it was 10 different hearings, looking at what happened in the 2020 election, looking at our overall election laws, what needs to be fixed, what didn't work out well, what caused all the concern and dissension from the results of the last election, the process itself. And it turns out we're still dealing with an election law that was written in 1937. And a lot of those laws haven't changed. I mean, just an example, and I may have shared this with you before, Todd, in the current law, it says that you have to have a lantern at every polling place. Yeah. So, I mean, that's just an example of how outdated our election laws are. So what happened? The state government committee conducted this series of hearings. They gathered all the information, and now we are working on a package of bills that we will be rolling out. I believe the plan is to roll those out in June, but they will address election integrity, election reform. We want everyone to know that it is going to be easy to vote but hard to cheat. That's the mantra that we're going by. We have processes that need to be fixed. We want to make sure everyone knows that their vote's going to be counted only once, and that there will be election integrity, there will be election transparency, and there will be an easy way to vote but a hard way to cheat.
There has been pushback in a number of these states that have enacted legislation reform or election reform legislation, and they've come from a corporate level as well as from just a general activism level. And there have been some real threats against those laws and the people who are holding the positions that, and the states where they are. In Georgia, it was devastating. They pulled the Major League Baseball All-Star game, all of those jobs, they just disappeared, all of that money. Is that sort of pushback helping to influence the way these laws are being written in Pennsylvania?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to take the time to actually look at the laws. The Georgia laws were not what they were made out to be in many cases. There was a lot of rhetoric, a lot of politics involved. I don't agree with Major League Baseball pulling the All-Star game from Georgia. I don't think sports should be involved in politics at all, and that's just my personal opinion. But our laws are going to be common sense laws, and I've had a preview of them. I've spoken with Seth Grove. He's the chairman of the state government committee, and him and I are actually going to sit down when I'm in Harrisburg in a couple of weeks and do an interview, so that the people that I represent here in Indiana County can hear firsthand from him what they learned, what these laws are going to look like, because I think it's so important people understand that we're trying to do what makes sense, not over restrictive, not make it harder to vote, but make it harder to cheat, as I keep saying. But that's the simple cure that we need to have right now, is to make sure people feel comfortable when they're voting. And I really think that people need to understand the law, though, before they start following social media posts, start following this or that that's said about certain laws, because when you really get down to it, it's important that you understand what the law actually says, not what the media interprets it to be or what certain political affiliations interpret it to be.
There is a perception that any legislation reforms in states such as Georgia, and since Pennsylvania's legislature is Republican controlled right now, that this is a Republican thing, that Democrats aren't involved in this process. The case or not the case?
Certainly not the case. The State Government Committee is a bipartisan committee. There were Democrats and Republicans involved in those hearings, and I've even heard from some of my Democratic colleagues that they had their eyes opened as to some of the testimony. And there was testimony across the board, from county election officials to state government officials, to people from the Department of State, to agencies from outside the state, who have been through this before. So it was definitely not a partisan effort. It was a bipartisan effort to try and get to the truth, to peel back the layers and see where we need to fix things. And as I said, what they discovered was really eye-opening on many levels. When you're looking at a law that was written in 1937 and hasn't been updated since that point in time.
Couple of things I have spoken with you about recently. In fact, the last time we spoke, you were on your way to a meeting at the Homer City Generating Station.
Yes.
Reggie legislation, of course, that moves forward, will there be an effort to stop the Reggie regulations? Is that the wise course of action? What's the latest on that?
Well, that is certainly the ongoing effort. More and more people are coming out with concerns over Reggie, the economic impacts that it will have on Pennsylvania, the loss of jobs, the loss of electric generation. Are there really substantial impacts to global warming and climate change if we enact Reggie? That's some of the questions that are being asked. But more and more trade unions are coming out supporting our efforts to have this vetted through the legislature. And as has been said to the governor of the administration, if Reggie is so good for Pennsylvania, then why won't you put it through the normal process and let the voices of Pennsylvania residents be heard? We're elected to represent Pennsylvania, and we have not been permitted to be part of this process. And I've talked about it over and over again. Senator Pittman has talked about it, because we know firsthand what's going to happen. That tour of the Homer City Generating Station last week was very eye-opening. And you have men and women working there that have worked in other states. Particularly the plant manager down there was in New York State when New York enacted Reggie. He's here now. I think that speaks volumes. And he pretty much said, if Reggie is enacted, we understand that the Homer City Generating Station may not be here forever, but if Reggie is enacted, it's going to be an immediate impact. That plant will shut down. Our electric generation will move to another state, and it's not just here in Indiana County. These impacts are going to be widespread across this Commonwealth. You're going to see your electric costs go up. Manufacturers are going to see their electric costs go up. And when you start talking about millions and millions of dollars in overhead, they're going to look to other states. I know that Reggie wasn't directly responsible for what happened with U.S. Steel and their decision to pull out of that $1.5 billion investment, but the over-restrictive regulations play a role in that. And this governor, since he's taken office, has threatened, this tax or that tax on certain industries. He's basically tried to punish the energy industry, and it's really unfathomable to me why you would do something like that when we have such an abundance of resources here. Coal is not dead. The coal mines are doing well, and people need to realize that there's. When you start talking about energy, and I don't want people to think that I'm against renewables or solar or wind or hydro, and even the guys at the power plant said this last week, you need a balanced energy portfolio. And those cold winter months and then those hot summer days, that plant down there in Homer City is firing on all cylinders.
Yeah. Okay. So a part of the Homer City generating story is the tax base for the Homer City or Homer Center School District.
Yes.
You also have been meeting with the representatives of the school district. They're very concerned about fair funding in Homer Center and really across the state. School districts are wondering about that. Why is it such a problem funding these schools and funding them fairly?
It's unfortunate that I think Homer Center is one of those school districts that is caught up in the formula in the wrong way. I facilitated a meeting last week with the Homer Center superintendent and their business manager in my office with the Department of Education. A couple of school board members were on the Zoom call, and we started to peel back the layers. Why is Homer Center seemingly being shortchanged on every opportunity they have to get funding, whether it's in the state budget, whether it's in the federal relief? And it looks like the formula based their starting line item in the budget based on the median household income from the early 90s. Mm-hmm. And then they just, instead of looking at it freshly every year, they build off of that. And so in that point in time, Homer Center in the Center Township area, Homer City, their economic base was much different than it is now. Conversely, a lot of other school districts in Indiana County have changed in the opposite way. And so what happens is it looks like they're basing this formula on the fact that Homer Center has a better income source than they actually do. And so they're getting less state funding, less federal funding. So we worked through that with the superintendent and the business manager and the Department of Education. They were pretty frank with us. They said, we see it too. And so we're going to have an opportunity to revisit that formula here coming up. And I urge the Department of Education to make sure that Homer Center is part of those discussions when we look at this formula and how best to fix it so that it is fair and equitable to all school districts across Pennsylvania. Yeah. But you also mentioned the tax base. And the Homer Center generating station, during the course of that call, the superintendent leaned over to me while the Department of Education was on the call and said, if that plant shuts down, we're in trouble. Yeah. People need to realize that.
Yeah, well, that would be really the same situation as Halliburton, FMC, any other business that left that school district region that pulls tax dollars away.
Right.
That also pulls income away, and that affects the formula.
Yes, and and then it just multiplies.
Yeah, right. It builds upon its negative aspects. Okay, so just a couple of moments left with State Representative Jim Struzzi. I know that you're busy in Harrisburg, but you're also around the district. Anything coming up folks need to know about?
Well, I'll be in the district here for the next 2 weeks. Then when we return, we're going to start digging into the budget in earnest. We've kind of been put on hold with the budget discussions because we still don't have guidelines from the federal government on any of that funding, the billions of dollars that's supposed to be coming to the Commonwealth. So I think we're going to get to a point where we have to start making some decisions on the budget moving forward. The good news is that some state revenues are looking better than anticipated. But that's going to be at the forefront. We've really tried to address a lot of the issues that arose during the pandemic. Passed a bill out of Children and Youth that's going to look at the pandemic's impact on opioids and children. I think that's so vitally important. We passed a bill yesterday to look at the overall pandemic response, what we did well. As I've been saying, we can't let this happen again. So this really comprehensive bill we passed yesterday will look at everything from PPE to unemployment compensation, all the way down the line, even the business closures and things like that, to make sure that we learn from what happened and so that we don't end up repeating this the next time there's a crisis like this.
Representative Jim Struzzi, thanks.
Thank you, Todd.
It's Indiana in the Morning.
Right now, we're giving you